Hello, everyone. This video is about China-US trade. Do you remember when Trump and Xi Jinping had a phone call? What did I tell you all? Trump has already agreed to make a lot of significant major concessions. You could put it this way. Trump has completely lost the China-US trade war. In this video, I'll explain everything to you in detail. Yesterday, a new round of trade talks was held in London on the 5th. The Geneva talks took place in May. This was the first meeting after negotiations between the two countries. There was also a meeting in Jeju Island in between, but that one wasn't at such a high level. Now we're back to the highest level meeting. Basically, that's how it is. The entire US delegation showed up. These three big names, Benson, Lutnick, and Greer. They're known as the Iron Triangle. For the Chinese side, it's obvious. Hou Lifeng, the highest-ranking official, a member of the Politburo and vice premier of the State Council. Because he visited the UK, so they went to the UK to meet. This time, the meeting took place in the UK. Lutnick showed up this time. Why wasn't he there last time? This time, Lutnick was present because he's the Secretary of Commerce. They're talking technology export controls. I'm telling you. As soon as Trump talked to Xi Jinping, they immediately released rare earths. Actually, Trump agreed to loosen restrictions on technology exports. That's why Lutnick is here. The question is just to what extent things will be relaxed. His involvement means Trump intends to put the issue of export controls on table. Talks with Chinese side. No. Now that tariffs have been put aside, they're talking about non-tariff issues. Let me explain it to you. The game over tariffs has already been lost. Why is that? Because you capped the tariffs on China at 30%. The Chinese side also took back 10%, so that's an extra 20%. You can't reach agreement with the rest of the world either, because everyone thinks it's unfair. After all, China has the largest trade surplus with the US in the world, and you're charging them 30%. China gives out the most trade subsidies, the most government grants, and has the most state-owned enterprises. You charge them 30%. And they charge you 10%. So you're adding. How much are you really collecting from them? The whole tariff war has already indeed been lost. Where's the biggest problem? It's that Trump can't stand the stock market dropping, and he can't tolerate the inflation and shortages caused by actually not having Chinese goods. That's just laid out there for everyone to see. So we set aside the tariffs. Then basically, everything else gets stuck for everyone. China only has one move, and that's rare earths. They'll hold back until you have to give in on other things. If that happens, you lose. China has one move, rare earths. Before you started this whole tariff war, you were the one squeezing China's neck. So China didn't dare to hold back rare earths. Now China is holding back rare earths. And compared to Biden's time, you need to put something. Doesn't that mean you've lost? Explain to me. You've lost. In all the other trade wars, you know, you actually ended up weaker than Biden. So what's there to brag about? I really don't get what Trump supporters have to brag about either. Choosing to hold talks in the UK, that's actually beneficial for China because UK-China relations restart. Just look at the example of the UK. According to data released by the Chinese government on Monday, in May, China's exports to the US plummeted by 35%, which is the biggest drop since COVID-19 pandemic began. This doesn't mean much. Why? Because in May, everything basically came to a halt. China's exports to the US were at 145%. Nearly stopped. And why did it stop? Of course, trade would take a huge hit. In the previous months, there was a big increase. They stocked early. Once you add many tariffs, it drops sharply. So this temporary pullback doesn't really mean anything. You have to look at the average numbers to get the real picture. In April, China's exports to the US had already dropped by 21%, and now it's down another 35%. That's because the tariff started in April. Before April, they were rushing to import as much as they could. This shows that the US tariff policy has seriously disrupted trade between the two major economies. All the world's trade experts will tell you this. Trade is like water. It's very hard to block it completely. Result: has China's overall exports actually decreased? No. It's the same situation as last month. Exports to the US have gone down, but exports to regions, Southeast Asia and the EU, exports to the rest of the world increased. That's offset loss. The goods just went somewhere else. They went to other places, went to the US again. That's why trade is like water. As long as there's even a tiny gap, the water will flow out. It's just like a problem Hong Kongers are all too familiar with. Especially in industrial buildings, water leaks. Those old buildings, it does water leak from. People can argue about it forever. Is it the outer wall or the bathroom? You have to use colored water to see exactly where it's leaking from. In May, exports increased. You go chase the debt. They went up by 4.8% to $316 billion. That's lower. April it increased 8.1%. You know, that was quite a big jump. Let's take a look. Starting from February, right around here. In March, exports were still surging. March saw another spike. Actually, all along, these goods, the overall trend has been, ever since the trade war began, exports to the US have dropped from 25% down to 18%. It all just shifted to Southeast Asia, and from Southeast Asia, as well as Mexico, exports to the US increased by about the same amount. It just so happens that China has reduced, so it doesn't mean much. After back and forth, this is the end result. This is a great example to show everyone. Exports to the US. Right here, starting from this point, I'm telling you, from here on, people started stockpiling goods. Stockpiling. They built an inventory. Then here, there was a sharp drop. This one. This represents total exports. This line didn't drop. Total exports are still high. This red line. Exports to other countries increased, offsetting the decline in this line. In May, China's imports dropped by 3.4%. A continued decline. As a result, its trade surplus is even bigger than before. Imports. Why did they drop? Well, of course, they're buying less from the US. That's not important. Because if you don't buy American products, you have to buy something else. Skipping soybean. They'll buy from Brazil. There aren't really many other options. No US gas. Then you'll buy it from the Middle East. You can't stop using natural gas, right? Just means China's economy is weakening, so imports have decreased. Do you get it? From 2025 up to now, the trade surplus has already reached $500 billion. This trade surplus is what allows China's economy to stay afloat. Well, not. Because domestic demand is shrinking. It helps cushion the impact caused by the drop in domestic demand. Both official and private indices measuring China's manufacturing activity show that. In May, new export orders continued to shrink. The outlook is for further contraction. There are a few reasons for this, because a large portion of your products aren't going to the US to other places. About other places, they're also building up their own trade barriers. You get what I mean? It's not going to go smoothly anywhere. If you sell a lot, it'll kill off their businesses. That's why countries everywhere are pushing back against China's exports of cheap goods. Secondly, the other major destinations, Europe and Southeast Asia, both have weak economies. Their demand is down. All right. No tariffs talk. We're talking about rare earths. Now it is temporarily exported. If you want me to keep rare earths open forever, then the US has to open up a lot of things to China. You'll be disadvantaged. Let me tell you, if Donald Trump hadn't started this tariff war, you'd still be holding onto semiconductors and those things like AI. But out of nowhere, this trade war started. China tightened up on rare earths. Now you have to loosen your controls instead. What are you even saying? Where did all those grand strategies about encircling China go? Now they're relaxing things for China. Can you hear that? Do you understand? China. I've already analyzed this rare earth issue. China produces 70% of the world's rare earth mining. Second is Myanmar. The US has 14%. Australia has 6%. Add Myanmar to that. They are 90% of world supply. As for China's rare earths, before all this, China had 100% of the market. Now that's changed. Demand for rare earth surges. Why has demand for rare earths increased so much? Semiconductors only use a tiny bit. But the biggest demand comes from electric vehicles, motor, which need permanent magnets, high-performance magnets. The demand for these has skyrocketed. Electric vehicles went from a few 100,000 units a year to 10 million units a year in just a few years. Globally, 10 million electric vehicles all require powerful motors. In April, China, because you added tariffs on 7 strategic rare earths, set up an export licensing system. Special impact on perpetual motion machines, weapons, hard drives, permanent magnet products. How many does an F-35 use anyway? You could practically pick them up off the street. Right. Only around 100 F-35s are produced each year. So what's the big deal? The military doesn't actually need that many. Hard drives use a bit more, but it's the motors that are the real game changer. Without these export licenses, exporters can't ship out these metals. It's not a total embargo, but you need to have a license, which means the US must have a license. In other words, they have to apply for a license from them, but actually, they just don't approve it. So what can you do about it? You can put it or not. That's the beauty of the licensing system. If you like, put it. It's like a tap. They can turn it on or off. Car manufacturers are warning because of the complicated and slow licensing process for rare earth magnets. They're facing shutdowns. Many supplier factories have already stopped production, magnet makers, and those making parts. The chairman of an American rare earth company said, China has strategically created a list. They picked something that was vital to the American economy and simply not supplying them. Just one thing can choke you off completely. I'm telling you as well. The White House has spoken out. Seriously, just listen to what I said a week ago. Once they got on the phone, they let it go, and Trump agreed. Otherwise, that call wouldn't have happened. China wouldn't release rare earths. This is what Hassett from the National Economic Council said. The US expects that after the handshake in London, any export controls will be relaxed. This involves a lot of things. I think when it comes to Chinese ships, charging fees for Chinese ships and all that, they don't even dare to enforce it. This is exactly what Hassett said. So far, the US is willing to make such concessions. The clearest signal. That's why there's confidence an agreement will be made. Of course, if you let it go, the deal will be made. The result is that China wins. In the end, only a 30% tariff is added, while China only adds a 10% tariff on you. And as for those measures against China, I believe that's why I'm buying NVIDIA. I'm telling you why. Put those AI chips is good news for NVIDIA. At the very least, they'll release a slightly cheaper one, called the B20. It will be announced within this month. I'm telling you in advance. NVIDIA will resume supplying chips to China, and this will be announced within this month. Write down what I'm saying right now. Trump on Truth Social should be going very smoothly. Of course, it goes well if you promise the other party something. Whatever they ask, just agree. There really shouldn't be any more doubts about the complexity of rare earth products. In other words, Donald Trump, you are unforgivable. The rare earth issue was brought up in 2017 and 2018. 8 years passed, and you're still being held by the throat. You still can't explain it. Back then, you should have come up with a proper plan and made enough rare earths. Nope. I've said it before. Mining rare earth. Reducing the use of rare earth materials. Recycling rare earths. Use alternatives. There's been absolutely no progress in any of these 4 areas. It's not that progress is impossible. Japan has managed to do it. For these 8 years, just sitting here, there's been no effort to learn from Japan. Japan has managed to cut its rare earth usage by 40%. Shouldn't they be punished for that? Donald Trump, Biden, Donald Trump, they all deserve a spanking. China's Ministry of Commerce has already approved some rare earth export applications. Actually, it's Europe that's been let off the hook. Europe and Japan, those places. China has already approved rare earth suppliers for leading American car companies. Temporary export license. This is him letting you go first, because Donald Trump verbally agreed to allow rare earths again. So he lets you go first. It's to give Donald Trump a bit of face, letting him go first, unless Donald Trump decides to extend it. Otherwise, the tariffs on China will expire in August. Nothing at all is going to happen. That's why the stock market rebounded. So I started buying back some American stocks. Do you get it? That's what it means. The tariff war, it's just a farce. The things Donald Trump wanted to achieve, he couldn't do any of them. First, improving the deficit. It didn't help at all. I'm telling you. Second, getting companies to return to the US is impossible. The result is exactly the same. Third, using it as a bargaining chip with others. He couldn't get anything out of it.